Over the last few weeks, we've seen a number of different opinions and arguments for and against this war with Iran. Most Democrats seem to oppose this war, most Republicans seem to support it, but maybe surprisingly to many people, key MAGA figures like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, people who campaigned for Trump, endorsed him, spoke at his rallies, have decisively split with the president on this issue of war with Iran. It might have something to do with the fact that in 2024, Trump explicitly campaigned on the idea of no new wars. And in 2016, he heavily criticized Bush and his involvement in the Iraq war, and even said that they lied about weapons of mass destruction. It might have something to do with that, but who knows? As a result, Trump has done everything he can to ensure that anyone who opposes this war has no voice in the MAGA party. He's called them low IQ. He's thrown out other typical Trumpian insults. Marjorie Taylor Greene is now Marjorie Trader Greene. But regardless of how you personally feel about this war, whether we should have been involved in the first place, what the justifications were, the ones that were provided, were those justifications legitimate, we have to ask ourselves a new question now that we find ourselves in the midst of this war. What is the lens that we view these conflicts through? Are we willing to acknowledge the heavy, sobering reality that American soldiers will die and already have died? That innocent civilians will be killed, and if not killed, their lives will be destroyed, devastated in the aftermath of these conflicts? Seems like a pretty obvious reality to acknowledge. War is bad, war is unpleasant. Innocent civilians will die, American soldiers will die. This is not something that we should take lightly or ignore. But as we'll see in this video, many of the top MAGA figures do not seem to want to acknowledge this reality. There's a phenomenon on the MAGA right that has taken on an anti-human, anti-Western, anti-Christian worldview. There is a warmongering faction of the Republican Party that seems to relish the prospect, the possibility of bloodshed and violence. They are eager for war. And worse, they pose as Christians, or at least allies of the Christian faith. They use Christianity as a weapon to rally evangelical Christians and other Christian Republicans to their cause. They invoke God's name as they call for violence and destruction. This has been going on for a while now. It's not just the Iran war. The neocons, the war hawks, have been around for at least several decades, but they haven't taken on a mainstream position in the MAGA party until very recently. It has never been Trump's official position until recently to involve America in wars abroad. And it certainly has not been his position to celebrate the fact that we are now involved in one. And we know this because he said it himself repeatedly throughout his campaigns. And even the people who are now cheering on this war celebrated the fact that Trump was a president of peace, as they put it. But of course, now that we have decided to go to war, they have revealed their true colors. I want to be clear that this video is not to discuss whether or not we should be in a war with Iran. This is not a political issue, it's a moral issue. It's not about geopolitical strategy or foreign policy. This is about the behavior that these people exhibit when we're talking about war. It's about how they celebrate and applaud the violence. It's about how they treat war like some sort of sporting event. To understand these people better and get inside their heads, we'll take a look at some quotes ranging from a few years ago to the present. These quotes will address both the conflict in the Gaza Strip as well as the war in Iran. The first comes from Greg Locke, who is the pastor and founder of Global Vision Bible Church.
The Gaza Strip, which has now been cut off by Israel, and rightly so, they should have cut them off a long time ago. Now, I don't care how insensitive you think I am to that. There's 6 doors in this church. You can leave anytime you want to. They've cut them off, electricity. They've cut off their water. They should have. Now, listen, I'm not for hurting anyone that's innocent. But anybody that supports terrorism is not innocent. You understand that? Israel should make the Gaza Strip a parking lot by this time next week. Destroy the whole thing. So I hope Netanyahu's a leader and he just mows the whole thing down by this time next week. See, here's what CNN and people want you to believe. Oh, those poor, oppressed Palestinians. Egypt flooded their escape tunnels and barricaded their walls so that the Palestinians cannot even come into Egypt. You know why? Not even Egypt wants terrorists in their town. You understand that?
This is a prominent evangelical pastor. He has several hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. He corresponds with the president. He was at the White House luncheon, the Easter luncheon a few weeks ago, calling for the total destruction, annihilation of a population of over 2 million people because they support terrorism. He doesn't distinguish between the Hamas terrorists and the innocent civilians or even the women and children. Every single one of them supports terrorism, and so they deserve to die. This is not the theological position I would expect from a prominent American pastor, but it's more common than you think. But Greg Locke is not the only popular right-wing influencer to attempt to dehumanize the entire population to justify their destruction. Mark Levin, who has his own Fox show, Life, Liberty, and Levin, had the following to say in late 2023. First of all, there are no innocent Palestinians. When a population raises their children from the time those toddlers are wearing diapers to hate and murder Jews, they have forfeited any claim of innocence. Secondly, civilian casualties are a fact of war. Palestinians should have thought about that before they elected terrorists to govern them. Once again, we see the broad generalizations and dubious claims. According to Mark Levin, Palestinian toddlers have forfeited their innocence due to the conditions in which they were raised. Notice the vindictive attitude and his casual dismissal of innocent civilian deaths. They're just a fact of war. They should have thought about it before they elected Hamas into leadership. And of course, what he's referring to there is a 2006 election in which the vast majority of the current population in the Gaza Strip was not even alive or certainly not old enough to vote. But according to Levin, they are all guilty of that election. They should have thought about it beforehand. Innocent civilian casualties are a fact of war. Too bad. You should always stop and pause when someone tries to dehumanize an entire group of people, especially when the claims are as vacuous as the ones made by Greg Locke and Mark Levin. This is exactly the kind of thinking that led to slavery, that led to the Trail of Tears, that led to countless atrocities throughout the entire span of human history. We are good, civilized, enlightened. They are brutal, savage, and violent. We can do whatever we want to them and still maintain the moral high ground. They're all terrorists. They would all kill you if they had the chance. So total annihilation is not only okay, it's the only possible solution. It's the only moral solution. But this is not a Western belief. We believe in imago Dei. Every human being is created in the image of God. Every human being has equal value, inherent value, just due to the fact that they're human beings. We don't group people together in broad generic categories so we can dehumanize them and sentence them all to death. The loss of the fundamental principle that every human being has inherent worth is exactly what leads to tyranny, the degeneracy of Western civilization, the unraveling of Western civilization. Many of our leaders do not believe in any of the values that we espouse in the West. They have a disdain for human life. They hate the fact that they have to rely on the people to entrust them with the power to rule us. They're explicitly anti-Western and anti-human. Of course, they're happy to get up on their soapbox and pontificate about how much they love America and Western civilization and the Constitution to rally their voter base or their following. Mark Levin's show is literally called Life, Liberty, and Levin. But it seems like out of those three, Levin is the only one that he actually has any interest in preserving. As the focus has shifted to the Iran war, we've seen the same appalling rhetoric and disturbing statements from Trump himself as well as his acolytes. So the first quote that we'll read here comes from Trump on Easter morning, which I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with. Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the f***ing straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah, President Donald J. Trump. As a Christian, one has to wonder what Trump is intimating by posting this on Easter morning. It doesn't seem like a coincidence. Trump is purportedly a Christian himself. He certainly claims to defend the Christian faith, but over the last few weeks, he's made an explicit mockery of Christianity. Maybe the best example of this is the image he posted in which he presented himself as Jesus Christ. Equally as disturbing is the message he posted, I think it was 2 days after his Easter morning post. And it began with this: "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will." This is a chilling message and threat to the Iranian people, but every American should be concerned by this rhetoric as well. Just weeks ago, Trump said that all he wanted for the Iranian people was for them to rise up and take advantage of the U.S. military intervention to tear down the brutal theocracy, the Ayatollah, and, install democracy for themselves and become a free people. He said, "America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny." But now he's threatening to wipe out their entire civilization. Thankfully, these threats have not come to fruition yet, but Trump's followers have no problems with this rhetoric. In fact, they enthusiastically support it, they encourage it, and they participate in it themselves. Florida Congressman Randy Fine celebrated Trump's Easter morning threat to blow up the civilian infrastructure, the power plants and bridges. Happy Power Plant and Bridge Eve. This is not even close to the worst thing that Randy Fine has said publicly. In a similar vein to the comments we saw from Greg Locke and Mark Levin, Randy Fine wants to conflate all Palestinians with terrorism to justify killing them all. Two comments in particular caught my attention. Palestinian equals Hamas. Hashtag bombs away. And the second one, in World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. I don't think many people realize how psychotic, how insane these people are. Randy Fine is not some fringe commentator living in his parents' basement. He's a U.S. congressman. He's on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He was emphatically endorsed by Trump as an America First candidate and a warrior for the MAGA party. And these are his public statements, implying that we should nuke an entire population. Why? Because, well, we did it in World War II. That's his justification. Laura Loomer, a independent journalist, MAGA influencer, endorsed and seemingly loved by Trump, had this to say about the Iran war. "I can't wait to see what gets blown up tomorrow. Guess we will have to wait in anticipation to see what President Trump does." She also attacked Joe Kent, famously the former National Counterterrorism Director who resigned in protest of the Iran war. He came out and said that all of the justifications, or almost all of the justifications given for the war, were entirely fabricated. As a result, he was quickly discredited and ostracized and cast out of the Trump circle. But Laura Loomer takes it a step further. She didn't just attack Joe Kent and his position on the Iran war, she attacked him personally and his late wife, who died serving the country in Syria. How about we restrain the Islamic terrorists? The ones who blew your wife up. How come you simp for the people who killed your wife in the name of Islam? Traitor to your country and a traitor to your wife. If you had any doubts about the character of the people who are cheering on this war the loudest, look no further than Laura Loomer and her attacks on Joe Kent. Joe Kent, whose only crime was to oppose the Iran war, Laura Loomer accuses him of simping for the terrorists who killed his wife. What an appalling, disgusting statement. But this is not even arguably the worst thing she's said. Right on cue, she mourned the ceasefire and the fact that we were not going to be wiping out the entire civilization. I cannot cheer for this 2-week ceasefire with the Iranian regime. We woke up yesterday expecting to finally wipe out an entire civilization of Islamic jihadists, but instead the mullahs in Iran have been given more time to recalibrate. We have to really understand what these people are saying. Laura Loomer is saying that the entire Iranian civilization, 90 million people, they're all Islamic jihadists. She didn't target the Ayatollah, the regime, the military. It's the civilization itself that she targets here. And she woke up disappointed that we didn't wipe the entire civilization out. You may remember as a kid waking up on Christmas morning and rushing to the tree to see what kind of presents you got. The suspense, the joy, the excitement. That's how I imagine Laura Loomer feels when she wakes up in the morning and checks the news to see if Trump has nuked Iran yet. You can't get mad at jihadists for being cruel, inhumane, violent, radical, and then in the same breath get disappointed when the American government decides not to wipe out an entire civilization of 90 million people. Those values don't really make sense. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham was shaking with excitement. He was characteristically grinning ear to ear as he discussed the war on Fox News.
When this regime goes down, we're going to have a new Mideast. We're going to make a ton of money. Nobody will threaten the Straits of Hormuz again. You just wait to see what comes in the next 2 weeks.
The next 2 weeks meaning what?
We're going to blow the hell out of these people.
He also suggested that nuking Gaza was an option, and he not only suggested it was an option, he said that if he were in Israel's shoes, that is exactly what he would do.
When you look at the last few years since October 7th, many people in this part of the world say what happened in Gaza does not align with Christian values. Killing children, killing mothers,
I'll be honest
killing
with
families
you.
who are not militants.
Yeah, I don't buy that at all.
Why?
Because what did we do in World War II? Did we think 1 minute about starving the Germans? Did we bomb every city into smithereens? So this is a war.
No, October 7th to World War II.
Yes, I am. If you don't understand this is a threat to Israel's
survival. And then they
survival,
flattened Gaza.
Just flatten it. We flattened Berlin. We flattened Tokyo. Were we wrong to drop an atomic bomb to end the Japanese reign of terror? Were we? So my view, if I were Israel, I would have probably done it the same way.
And just like Randy Fine and other Republicans, he appeals to our behavior in World War II as if that were this unimpeachable model for how warfare is to be conducted. And he uses this model as a way to justify brutality in the Middle East. And this, of course, assumes two things, both of which are unlikely. One, that America is faultless and blameless in its behavior during the Second World War. And two, that the situation in the Middle East is identical or at least very similar to the conditions that we saw in World War II. They never give any real comparisons or historical context, but apparently in their world, it's perfectly acceptable to use World War II as some sort of moral paragon or guideline or rule book as to how we should conduct war now in the Middle East. But this behavior is not normal. When did it become normal to celebrate and applaud violence and death and destruction? To celebrate bombing civilian infrastructure or flattening Gaza into a parking lot? To criticize and ostracize and try to destroy the careers of anyone who is opposed to this violence? You're not anti-American or pro-terrorist if you don't believe that we should be involved in these conflicts in the Middle East. Or even if you just believe that the rhetoric these people are using is repulsive, which it is. But they will, in the same sentence, condemn their enemies in the Middle East for brutal practices and savage behavior, and then use that behavior to justify doing the exact same thing. And if you aren't 100% on board, you're a terrorist sympathizer, anti-patriotic, anti-American, the list goes on. These are the tactics that people like Laura Loomer and Mark Levin use. And they're the exact same tactics that we saw Pam Bondi use when she was being interrogated about the Epstein files. Instead of answering the questions, she deflected back to her questioners, accusing them of Trump derangement syndrome and hurling out other insults, doing anything but answering the questions. But that's exactly what this is. It's a deflection tactic. Instead of making a cogent argument, laying out the justifications, allowing people to debate, they try to silence you, shut you up. They call you names and shout you down. Anti-Semitic, anti-American, unpatriotic, pro-terrorist. And the worst one they'll accuse you of is being anti-Christian. Because let's remember, these people are the ones that claim to be on the side of Christianity, or many of them claim to be Christians themselves. Laura Loomer, when she ran, said that they're trying to persecute Christians, the most persecuted people in the world. I look forward to being their advocate when I win my race and, get elected as their next congresswoman. Randy Fine said that America's strength comes from our families, our faith, and our values. The Democrats are trying to erase the Judeo-Christian foundations that built this country. I will always fight to defend our values and protect our way of life. Senator Lindsey Graham, I believe I'm doing what God intended me to do right now, that I'm here for a reason. I'm putting ideas on the table that somebody needs to put on the table, and I need soldiers behind these ideas. And you are the army. You're God's army. It's almost laughable. It is laughable. Finally, President Trump. In America, we don't worship government. We worship God. Americans are dreamers too. We dream of a better future, of a country where every child can grow up free from violence and fear. In America, we don't worship government. We worship God. And we will always be protected by God. But these people have zero regard for the innocent lives that will be lost in these conflicts. In fact, they seem to derive pleasure not only from destroying their enemies, but from destroying the innocent civilians that will be caught in the crossfire. One has to ask themselves why. There are countless explanations one could give, but I think a simple yet accurate diagnosis is that they don't believe in God, and so they spend every waking minute trying to become their own God, to elevate themselves to the position of God, to emulate the power of God. And what better way to do that than to decide who lives and who dies, especially when you're dealing with innocent life. But they are not God, and they have no real power. They are agents of chaos and death, Satan himself, and they make no attempt to conceal this fact. Or maybe more accurately, they can't conceal this fact. It would be so easy for Trump and his acolytes to focus on the actual problems, or even just pretend to focus on the actual problems. Hamas, the theocracy, the Ayatollah, Hezbollah, they could present a fairly compelling case, at least to Republicans, for why we need to continue supporting efforts in the Gaza Strip, in Lebanon, and obviously in Iran. But they can't help themselves. Their hatred runs so deep that they can't even control their language, their rhetoric in public, in writing. Over and over again, they show their true motives, the true inside of their soul. It was never really about the terrorists or the regime for many of them. It's about a deep repulsion and disdain for humanity, and especially for the Arab countries in and around the Levant. Do we really believe that their disdain for human life is limited to the Iranian people or the people in the Middle East more broadly? How long until that disdain is projected back onto Americans who disagree with them or oppose them? Already we've seen them try to viciously discredit and destroy the careers and the lives of anyone who opposes them. Do not make the mistake, as many Christians and Republicans already have, of thinking that you have to support this war or this appalling rhetoric because of some loyalty to Trump or the MAGA party or the Republican Party. The MAGA movement has been completely hijacked by war hawks who want you to believe that anything short of complete and unwavering support for this war is anti-American and anti-Christian and anti-Western. But in reality, these people are the most anti-American and anti-Christian and anti-Western I could possibly conceive of. But many Christian Republicans are more afraid of being called a liberal snowflake by Ben Shapiro or a terrorist sympathizer by Laura Loomer than they are of God's word. I want to end by reading a short passage from Proverbs 1 that I think is more relevant than ever given the situation we are in. My son, if sinful men entice you, do not give in to them. Do not go along with them, do not set foot on their paths. For their feet rush into evil, they are swift to shed blood. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush only themselves.